What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Alex Cuesta Show. How is everybody doing on this Wednesday, November 16th of 2022? Before we get into any of our fun jazz that we always have, and today we have a nice and fun episode ahead for you guys. Like, share, follow, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating, spread this word of mouth, go look up the Alex Cuesta Show on the socials. We are there. So before I get to the important person, I'm going to say hi to David.
And that's a fair point. That's a very fair point. I'm looking around my room because I've been doing some cleaning and some stuff to make things look better in here. And if you had video, you could see my very crooked Crystal Palace flag behind me. But there's some things I still need to take down and make up. So I'm just getting bothered.
So, David, before we get going, you actually have a promotion because you started a new venture, kind of a new old venture. So what are you doing?
Yes, I am back to streaming games like I used to years ago. This time I'm under Questacola. I literally just started yesterday. I will be streaming every day as much as I can. Schedule is not out yet, but I will make one for when I know concrete details of when I can actually be on and streaming for a certain amount of time.
Yeah, so he's on Twitch. Go look for Questacola. The logo is a Game Boy with some bottles on it and Questacola inside of it. It's a Game Boy-esque. Don't sue us, Nintendo. We're not big enough to be sued. Anyway, so today, our guest is somebody I think that if you are a content creator, you're going to want to take notes from this episode because it's going to be a good one. He is an inspirational speaker and coach who champions authentic connection and heart-based leadership. An Inc. magazine top 100 leadership speaker. He's spoken at TEDx 5 times. So if anyone knows what TEDx is, it's pretty badass. He's spoken there 5 times. He has over 650,000 social media followers spread all across the different social medias. He's recognized as an influencer and thought leader in networking, personal branding, and digital marketing. He's been named the 4th best leadership influencer according to Cred, a top 7 networking guru, and the 2nd best business coach to follow on Twitter. He founded DYPB, Discover Your Personal Brand, and the Thought Leadership Branding Club to help thousands discover greatness and create more meaningful impact. He recently won the gold medal in the Social Audio Awards for education and knowledge with his LinkedIn Mastery series that features on Clubhouse, Twitter Spaces, and LinkedIn Audio. So all in all, he really hasn't done much at all. He's just kind of there. But
take a drink of water after that.
Just a little bit. So he's Bobby Umar. What's going on, Bobby?
Hey, guys. Happy to be here.
Yeah,
Happy
it's
to
gonna
have
be
you.
fun. Yeah, so if anyone just was able to get through that part, it's been an hour. Bye, guys. Episode podcast over. But obviously, Bobby, you're someone who is very good at your craft. You are an inspirational speaker. I actually had the privilege of jumping into one of your spaces. I believe it was yesterday or 2 days ago. And happy birthday, belated birthday to your daughter.
Happy belated birthday.
And so I jumped into your space and, I found that, you're very good at what you do. You're good at bringing everybody in, talking about the subject. And one of the cool things I thought, and one of the things you brought up is how you always like to keep everything kind of positive or finish off with a positive. And I want to touch on that a little bit later. But I want you to kind of give me the origin story because you don't just kind of pop up one day, graduate college and go, I'm going to be a motivational speaker forever and make a massive brand. So how did this come about?
Yeah, I think that I've had a kind of a weird journey, but I originally got into engineering because I was good at math and physics. My dad's like, engineering's a good job. And so I did that. And then while I was there, I realized, I didn't realize while I was in it, how much I disliked it. But imagine me and my personality sitting in front of a computer for 10 hours a day, designing plane parts that repeat over and over again, panel 1, panel 2, panel 3, panel 4, and not talking to anybody. And I just did my work, but I wasn't good at my job. And eventually 4 years in, I got let go. And I think I was just absolutely bored out of my mind.
Yeah.
And I never thought about doing anything else because I was like, I guess you have to have a job, got to pay the bill, got to pay off the loan,
I have to ask you because I think everyone that kind of does their jobs is kind of like, everyone kind of is like, oh, I'm good at my job. Like you talk to anyone, no one thinks that they're bad at their job. Everyone kind of is like, I'm not the weak link. I do so much. Like everyone has that mentality. What was it like when you were like, I don't like this and I kind of suck. Like, what was that feeling? Because I think it's like a hard realization, right?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I didn't. It took me a while to think that I'm not really good at what I do. Like I never thought I was great at what I did. I just I just do my job. It's like putting up the shelves, creating the widgets. Like I was doing what I had to do. But at a certain point, I noticed that everyone during lunchtime and breaks want to talk about the latest engine or the really cool X14 9000. I was like, I want to talk about Brad and Jennifer Aniston. Like I want to talk about other things, and I didn't care. And then when I finally got let go, it was kind of numbing. I was like, well, what do I do now? And I didn't know what to do. I felt a little bit lost. Like, what can I do with myself? And so I looked for jobs, and most of them were start entry. I was like, well, I don't want to do this all over again. I just spent 4 years doing this stuff. And so someone said, well, why don't you do an MBA? And I was like, I don't know, an MBA. But then I was like, maybe I'll switch careers. And while I was working at my job, one reason I can tell you I was bored, I actually started a musical theater company. And so I was producing and directing musicals. I was a nonprofit organization. I was working with a lot of youth, and it was a lot of fun. We grew it to about 100 people in about 4 years while I was an engineer. Wow. And then I was like, this is kind of fun. Maybe I can go into marketing or communication, things like that. So I decided to do an MBA in marketing and just transitioned. And what I really wanted to do, actually, I really wanted to get into Hollywood. I want to do film and television. Like that, to me, doing theater production, I was like, this would be so much fun to do that. So I did my MBA to try to switch. And my MBA was a really good thing because my engineering degree, I had lost all confidence because I, failed courses and I barely graduated. And I was like, and then the job was terrible. Yep. But my MBA was a completely different thing. Found my mojo. I was president of the MBA Association. I got straight A's. Nice. Apparently, if you work hard, you can do well. And that's something I learned.
Now, wild concept.
Also, how much easier was it going back after having some real life experience and then not being a kid in school? And it's kind of like, I have to go to college. This is just the path. But going back as more of an adult, and it's like, no, I got to do this because if I don't, then what am I doing next? Like kind of not having an option. So only success was the option there.
Well, I went with purpose, right? And I was paying out of my pocket. So I was like, man, damn it, I'm going to do a good job here, right? Yeah. And I remember one time I was studying in the library and I was, doing my work. And one of the things that was amazing, if you know Seinfeld, George Costanza, he's kind of a loser, and then he does the complete opposite, and everything works out for him. So everything I did in my undergrad, where I partied too much and I cheated and I copied things and I didn't go to class, I did everything the other way. I was finishing assignments 3 days before they were due, and I was sitting in the library, and someone said to me, "Bobby, can I just ask you a question? Like what? Like I don't know. You're here. It's 10 o'clock at night, and you're just in such a cheery, optimistic mood." And I'm like, why are you like this? Because it's 10 o'clock in the library. You should be miserable. I'm like, well, because I choose to be here. Yeah. And I'm focused. I'm purposeful. I'm going to do a good job. And so, I graduated valedictorian, and it was an amazing time for me. So that focus and purpose really brought my mojo back. And then I went to brand marketing, did that for another 3.5 years. Again, didn't feel like I fit. It was a lot of work, a lot of hustle. I enjoyed it more. It was more social, which fit me. But at the end of the day, I was like, I'm still not liking this. And eventually I got let go of that one too. And I was like, now what do I want to do? Yeah. And so I decided to, let me figure this out. And, over the years, there's certain things that kind of gave me a clue what I could be doing. I was really big in entrepreneurship back in high school. I was a camp counselor, and for summer jobs, I didn't do engineering. I was a camp counselor or a camp leader. And so I was great with talking to the kids and, having fun and, very, 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 well-spoken and whatnot. And when I ran the theater company, again, I was taking the leadership, making a lot of speeches, doing a lot of sales, talking to people. And so I went through this whole process of my personal brand. I started interviewing people. I sent out a Survey Monkey. What do you think I should do? And everyone gave me the most information. And pretty soon I came into 5 things about my brand. One was Bobby loves people. Bobby loves to perform and present. Bobby loves to persuade and influence. Bobby loves to nurture. And Bobby loves diversity. And based on those 5 kind of brand values that I had, I came up with about a dozen things. But I decided to go, you know what? Motivational speaker. That's what I want to do. And everyone said, have you thought about being a speaker? I'm like, in the beginning I said no. But then, even when I was working in brand marketing back in the day, I used to work for Kraft and Unilever, I would volunteer to run events at the team building events. And I'd do an event and I'd do this whole team building event and they're like, holy cow, have you ever thought about doing this for a living? I'm like, no, I'm just trying to make it in the corporate world, whatever. Yeah. And I just ignored it. And then when I did that camp counseling stuff, this guy who was a motivational speaker said, Bobby, you're really good at this. Have you ever thought about doing this for a living? Like, no, I'm trying to make it in the corporate world and blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
And then finally, when I left, I was like, what do I do with my life? I talked to my 4 best friends. I call them the Council of Umar. And I said, guys, I'm not sure I want to go back to brand marketing. I'm not sure I want to go back to engineering. I don't know what to do. And they're like, you ever thought about becoming like a motivational speaker? And I'm like, you know what? I have, because everyone's been telling me for years. And so then so when my friends validated what I'd already done through my own personal branding research, I was like, you know what? This is what I need to do. And so I launched the business. I sent out thousands of emails and 500 brochures, and I started leveraging my network. And my company was born, and that was 17 years ago. And I haven't looked back since. So that's been a really amazing journey. And then the other part I think is important is social media became a big part of it. I'd often talk about digital. I'd often talk about networking, and I talk about personal branding. But then someone told me about Twitter. You should get on Twitter, Bobby. Oh, okay, what's Twitter? And then I started doing Twitter, and then I realized, what, social media is kind of interesting. Let me invest. Yeah. And so I launched my social media strategy, and I remember about 6 months into it, Twitter was the first thing that took off, and I got about 5,000 followers. And someone said, "Hey, Bobby, we love what you talk about. You're always talking about leadership and connection. Can you come in and do a paid speaking?" And I was like, "Absolutely!" And I was like, "Wow, this is great! I got a gig just off of Twitter. This is amazing. I got to do it." So then I invested fully into social media and digital, and that's kind of why it's been a big part of my overall strategy.
So awesome. I think what your story is, it's really cool because nothing was handed to you. You had some hard times, and you could have went like one of two ways, right? Like you had the perfect story to kind of have like the villain arc, right? Like down on his luck. I don't know what I want to do. I've been fired from jobs twice. I'm lost. And you could have easily, how many times have we heard people that fallen into those situations, and what do? They turn to drinking. They turn to drugs. They turn to a lot of things, and their life goes, and they have every excuse for it to go down. But, I think it takes a different type of person to be able to do what you did, to sit there and keep your head up. And instead of going down that downward spiral, just start thinking like, okay, what's next? And
although let's be real though, I mean, there were a lot of dark days and dark months, right? I mean, it's not like it's not like it happened just like that. Well, okay, I would change my life. No, like the transition of those things took me a long time. When I lost my first job, the transition was about, that was about like 8 or 9 months before I figured out what the heck am I going to do with myself. And then the other one, that transition was quicker because I was like, you know what? No, I need to figure this out. Yeah. And so, but that transition but still, it took me 6 months before I was okay, this is what I'm going to do. But that one was easier because I did the deep work. But transition, and there were a lot of dark days and a lot of eating, and
it's how it goes.
I have my vices, but I think that at a certain point, I was like, no, I need to figure this out. I totally get the need to figure this out. Everyone's always told me to try to figure it out. And so now let me just do this and see what I can do.
I like how you kind of did market research on yourself by asking.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you were basically like, okay, you were kind of pushing off something that you were very good and attuned to do. And you were like, let me figure out what other people see in me, what other people see that I like. Because even I might not realize what I like to do. So, and then you figured it out from there. I like how that really worked out. And it probably works for a lot of people if you just ask others, like, what do I enjoy?
And it was even better for me because, I realized I have a really large network because I sent out to a whole bunch of people. I had 117 people do my, and you should have seen my Survey Monkey. It was like this complicated matrix thing. But I had so many people respond to it. Yeah. It was extremely helpful.
And also, I think you kind of threw in there, and it's like a little aside, but you talked about once you decided that you wanted to go the public speaking route, you put your nose to the ground, you worked your ass off. You didn't just sit there and wait and it's like sent it out to a few people and, nobody wants me to speak at their things. Like, no, you said you sent thousands of emails. You really got engaged. You really worked to try and make this a thing where I think that, and you said that 17 years ago, 17 years is a different world than what we're living in now. And I think there's that you were ready to not have instant gratification. You were working your tail off because you wanted it to be a long game. So you put in the time early in order to create the long game. And you kind of just threw that in there. But I think that's a really important point that you're not where you are. You're not, Bobby Umar with, a 500,000 followers on Twitter, etc., all this other things, just because you got lucky. No, you worked to create the luck. Am I right with that?
Yeah, to a certain point. I mean, sometimes you just go with the flow of what's happening. Like the Twitter thing happened because I got that job. Okay, let me invest in Twitter, and then now I have 500,000 followers. Yeah. So sometimes things happen your way, and you're like, oh, let me try this. Let me, One of the things is you have to learn and evolve as you go along and as you grow. So the things I've done over the years, I've had to first I talked about networking and leadership, then I switched to personal branding because someone said, hey, personal branding, that's really interesting. Tell me more about that. And so I started talking about personal branding, and then the digital influencing happened afterwards. So, what's interesting is you have to continually be evolving and adapting as you go. And I think that's it. And the hustle is harder because as a speaker, I picked something that is really tough because, it's very easy for organizations and conferences to hire some vice president of a bank to come in because he'll do it for free because he doesn't care. He has a big salary. Whereas me, I have to position myself and no, I need to be paid for what I'm doing. And the other thing that's hard about the hustle is that most of the time they don't want you back. They want a different speaker the next year. So I have to keep getting new clients. So, and at the time I didn't realize that. And I had to figure out how am I going to navigate this. And then I evolved in terms of realizing that, I have to have a thought leadership brand. And instead of calling myself a speaker, I need to call myself an expert. What am I an expert in? I'm an expert in these three things. And yes, I speak. And yes, I have a book. And yes, I have a program and I coach people. But it's about the expertise.
So when you're lining up your speaking engagements and things like that, does the demographic you're speaking to or the people that, want you to come talk, does that kind of affect your decision? Because as you've gone and, with your current message, whatever it is, do you kind of get choosy because you find that this demographic takes to your message better, this doesn't? Or do you look at it and go, this demographic hasn't taken to my message very well? Well, that's a challenge. So I'm going here because I want it to be better. Like, how do you go about that?
Well, the thing is that because of my message, which is around branding and leadership development and, connection and communication and whatever that might be, it appeals to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So, over the years, I've spoken in the beginning, I was speaking to a lot of young people, entrepreneurs, youth, students, colleges, universities, things like that. And it was my favorite audience. Now, it didn't pay as well. And then, then you go to big corporate clients and they pays great. But then there's also this thing about personal satisfaction because you're there. Are they really going to implement it? Are you just there? I spent a whole day with somebody and then I'm like, okay, they're never going to do this. So it was nice to get the paycheck, but part of me was like, this is not where I'm getting fulfilled. So then I then focused on entrepreneurs. I was like, let's go with business owners because they're usually young, or they're hungry, or they're really passionate about what I'm trying to talk about, and so that evolved. So I think I have to be mindful of who my target audience is and who I focus on, because sometimes you got to pay the bills, and other times you go with what really feeds you and fulfills you.
So a lot has gone on over the last few years, especially when it's come to small business. Small businesses have been shellacked for many reasons over the last few years. Are you finding that at these conferences, you're kind of getting some entrepreneurs that are a little more desperate as they come to you to kind of, how quickly is this going to work and help with implementing what you're saying?
That's a good question. I mean, the pandemic was really tough, and I'll be very frank. Like I remember the pandemic hitting, and my kids were like, at that point, 9-11, and we had to take care of them, see what's going on, right?
Yeah.
And then I remember when it shut down, I was like, oh, the NBA shut down? Holy cow. Okay. And then Easter came, and I was like, wow, my entire speaking gigs for the entire year are gone.
Yep.
I made no money for 7 months. And it was like, what the hell am I going to do with myself? And so I had to pivot to, virtual training was fine, but it's just exhausting and not as fun. Yeah. And then I started doing coaching and storytelling. I started to realize that digital presence is something people really wanted. So I struggled too. I think that a lot of people, do I think they're desperate? I haven't personally felt that. I think that what's also interesting is that even though there was this whole pandemic situation, because we're now working from home more, because we understand the importance of virtual and digital presence, a lot of people were much more interested in leveraging digital, from LinkedIn to Twitter to Clubhouse and all that type of thing. And on top of that, they're also far more willing to be entrepreneurs, I think, because they don't want to do the 9 to 5 or the commute or whatever it is. So I think that there's a greater hunger to build entrepreneurship, to build that side hustle, to build something that aligns with who we are, want to do. So from that standpoint, I think it's good. Like I think that I wouldn't say there's. I mean, yes, there are people who are desperate, but I'd say that there's a greater, wider hunger to build something that we have on our own. So that's and from that there's a greater hunger and maybe a desperation to get that success sooner. Like instead of playing the 2-year game, you're playing the 6-month, the 12-month game. So yeah, I see that a little bit.
Yeah, that's I feel like that has to be sometimes tough, like when you're there and how many entrepreneurs come and tell you stories about, what happened to them during COVID and the struggles that they went through, and obviously you can relate because your business took a hit. So, it has to be, tough as someone that they're coming to look to you for answers on a lot of these things. Now, as you go along, and like you said, you've been doing this for almost 2 decades. What has been the challenges in as you're going to speak, making sure that you keep your message fresh, you keep your message on point, because, what you were saying 17 years ago, maybe some of the things you said there might be a little off color now, and you got to kind of pivot and make sure you're not offending these people now with some, and so how has that come along? How do you try and keep your message, fresh, effective? And what is it like when you get there and you do a message a few times and you're like, okay, maybe this isn't hitting like it used to. Time to, reflect again and reconfigure my spiel.
Yeah, so I've always been very good about getting feedback. I'm very proactive about it. So when people come to me and say, hey, Bobby, that was an amazing speech. I loved it so much. I said, great, thanks so much. What did you like about it? And what did you wish I did? And I'll ask them directly when we're networking after that. So I'm always bringing feedback. Yep. So that's why for me, I've evolved. Like when I went from networking to personal branding to digital. And also, networking was a big thing I talked about, but we switched from networking in person to now how do I network on LinkedIn? So I've always had an ear to the ground and listening to people. And even in the pandemic, I mean, one of the things I did was, because everything was gone, I booked Zoom calls. And in 2020, I had 400 Zoom calls with people all around the world from different walks of life, to learn about what they're doing, what's going on. And I learned that, there was a couple, I identified a couple of trends. One was storytelling, how to become a better storyteller online, how to become a storyteller with my teams virtually. I'm like, okay, this is an opportunity. Let me teach that. And the other one was, of course, about digital presence and thought leadership. How do I build that up to do the things I want to do in the world? So, I think that constantly listening to people and asking for feedback proactively is a huge way for me to shift and evolve. And I think the other thing I'll say is that in terms of evolving, in terms of what you say, how you say, I mean, there's some stories that I've been saying for years, for 20 years now, same stories because they work and people love them. Yep. And other stories that maybe I don't say anymore because, because I also use a lot of humor in comedy, right? Yeah. And there are certain comedy things you can't do anymore, right? So I remember one time I did a couple years ago, and I said something, I was like, oh shoot, I can't believe I said that.
I can imagine someone in your field like has to be careful in that sense. Like you could be like kind of what we do where we're not regulated. We could do a little more off color stuff because we're a little more free here, but you're going in and you're trying to connect with as many people as you can. And, maybe someone that's there might recommend you to go to someone other company. Yeah. So you try, you have to try your best there to not offend people.
Well, the big thing that I don't do anymore is impressions. Like, so that I often do impressions of people, right? But doing impression of, let's say, because I'm a huge fan. I'm a huge fan of Russell Peters, and he did a lot of ethnic comedy. Now, so I'd be willing to do that, but now, like, I only feel comfortable. You don't want to
risk it.
I only feel comfortable making fun of my own ethnicity and my own culture, right? And the other impressions I would do, I don't do that anymore because it's the world's changed.
Yeah. And then one thing I do want to ask is you talked about feedback after the speech, and especially in person. I know when you're giving usually a presentation or a speech, sometimes it's good to play off the way the audience is even interacting with your speech. Because sometimes, if someone's sleeping in the crowd, maybe you need to liven it up a little bit, or maybe that person's just gone and everyone else is actually involved. Do you come in with a certain speech and you kind of stick to it, but you might change tone and maybe change body language? Or do you ever like change kind of what you're going to say or some stories while keeping to the main theme?
Absolutely. I think that, the most important thing as a speaker is to know your audience.
Yeah.
And while you're doing it, to read the audience. So if things aren't working a certain way, you have to switch things up. And so I try to keep a read of the room for sure like that. And I will evolve. And I think that's important for any speaker to be able to read the room and listen to them.
So, Bobby, I have to ask, and I don't want to put you on the spot here, but I've seen it on LinkedIn a ton, and I really have to ask, what is a thought leader? Because when I think of thought leader, I read 1984 and all things, and I just think of like, you think this, like, it's like, it's a bizarre thing. Can you kind of explain what a thought leader is for, in layman's terms? Because I've never truly understood a lot of people put thought leader, and I don't know what that is.
Well, first off, the whole idea of thought leadership is the idea of, so personal branding is your reputation, your integrity, what people think of you and what they remember from you, right? And that's great. So having a clear personal brand is important. But once you have that clear personal brand, you can elevate it to a thought leadership brand status. And what that means is that now you become someone who's an authority in your field, a well-known, recognized expert. There's the expression, a personal brand is what they say when you're not in a room. Well, a thought leadership brand is what they say before you enter the room, when you're in the room, and even after you leave the room, because you are well known. So a thought leader would be somebody who is driving the conversation in an area of expertise. They are coming with new ideas. They're creating content. They're building relationships. They're, working on their communication skills to become better and better and better. So if you look at someone like Beyonce, she's a thought leader in hip hop and R&B, and she's constantly writing songs, right? And people look to her for new, amazing, music. You look at Gary Vaynerchuk, he's a thought leader in the entrepreneurship and the hustle and kindness. And these are things he talks about. And he does videos and he has books. And so, for me, a thought leader is somebody who's driving that conversation. They're innovating, they're disrupting. And as soon as you think of a topic, you think of these people. So, for me, when people think of thought leadership, branding or personal branding or, Twitter or LinkedIn and, authentic connection, I hope they think of me as someone who can help them out. And who's talking about these things with his content.
So I guess it's kind of a simplified way of saying like they're an expert that's influential in their field, and you just kind of encompass that into thought leader, I guess. Is that
a way to put it? I break it down to three things, right? So, like some people have a lot of deep relationships and broad relationships and followers. Now, that's not a thought leader. That's an influencer, right? An influencer is not necessarily smart and does not necessarily have expertise. The second piece is now sharing content and ideas around that expertise to drive. That's a big part of that's expertise. And the third part of it is they are constantly working on their speaking, writing, active listening, communication. So, Malala Yousafzai is writing books and Gary's doing videos and Beyonce's writing songs. And so a thought leader is doing all of those things. They have the influence, they have the expertise, and they have the skills. And if you do those three things, that's how you can dominate as a thought leader in your field.
Thank you. I appreciate that because I genuinely had no idea. And that's a really good, because I've seen it all over LinkedIn and I'm just like, and so many people are claiming it. And I'm just like, what does this even mean? And now I could see the frauds. So that's cool. So now I could see who's
right. You can't call yourself cool. Someone has to call you that.
And I sure as hell know I cannot put thought leader yet in my LinkedIn bio. So, so I want to kind of talk to you a little more about the, what you would kind of tell people in the job itself, because, you're talking about, brand growing and networking and kind of social media, kind of that presence. Now, without getting too deep into it and giving away your moneymaker, kind of any tips and hints for somebody starting out, even us over here that really wants to grow their brand, that wants to grow their network, that wants to have a bigger presence. What's kind of a foundational piece to how to do that? Well,
personal branding is broken into three areas. So when we say DYPB, there's discover your personal brand, there's design your personal brand, and then there's deploy your personal brand. And most of us are in design mode. We're constantly coming up with the tactics, the market material, and the plans, to launch my career, launch my business, and launch that digital strategy. And we're designing. But What most people don't do is they don't do the discovery part. And that is basically the deep dive analysis into your strengths and your weaknesses, what people love about you, doing surveys, doing personal assessments, doing online assessments, all that work. And it takes time, like, 20, 30, 40, 50 hours to begin with to really figure that out. And most people don't want to do that work. And what happens is when you design a plan for your career or for your business or for a digital marketing strategy, you're maybe, you're basing on a little bit of intuition. A couple of friends told you something. Maybe you work with one guy. It's about 40, 50, 60% aligned. And so when you launch that digital marketing strategy, 6 months later, you're like, it's not working. When you launch that career strategy, 2 years later, you're like, I'm still unhappy. When you launch that business strategy, 18 months later, like, I'm not getting the results that I want. Now, if you do the deep dive work, and that's the thing that 90% of people don't do, that's where the magic happens. I was working with a client, and once we did all that stuff, once you have that, you have clarity, purpose, your target, what you're doing, what your gift to the world is, what you're trying to do. And that drives everything. It drives your content, it drives your strategy, it drives your assets, it drives your relationships, it drives your community building, it drives everything you want to do with where you want to go. Because now you see the path and legacy you want to create for yourself. And so for me, that's the big thing. Because once you have that, then you design something that's 85, 95, 90% aligned, and then you deploy with way better success and results than someone who's just, haphazardly doing it. So I think the first thing is to really do the deep dive work into yourself. That is critical. And then once you figure that out, now the learning and the, and coming with a plan and working on the tactics and working on the strategies, that's going to be key. And that comes with things like, your content strategy, your digital presence, your mindset, your speaking, your confidence, your building meaningful relationship. These are all things that are important for any sort of personal brand to build to our thought leadership brand.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And, and it really comes back to, and you have a lot of good advice there, but I like that it comes back to being internal first and doing the hard work within yourself first. Because I feel like, a lot of us, especially in our newer, younger age, we kind of go at things half-cocked. We have an idea, we jump into it, we do it, it doesn't work, we try a new one. And it's like you said, we didn't take the time to look and ask a big network of people like you did. Kind of ask a bunch of people, create a nice big survey monkey, and then not only get the feedback, but take the feedback. Because you could do all that work, get the feedback, and it's like, well, that's not what I wanted, so I'm going to disregard it. So it's like you were smart enough to take that feedback and kind of run with it. And I really like that message of continue to, do the hard work first, and then everything else will become so much easier. And I think that's awesome. So,
and the other thing I want to add to this is that, the whole, what you said, doing things and trying things, that's really good. A lot of people who are older, they spend like 5 years analyzing to death what they want to do, and they don't actually do anything. And there's other people who are doing things without any kind of strategy or rudder to guide them. You should be doing both. You should be putting stuff out there and at the same time working on the back end to figure out exactly what you're trying to do. So I think what you're doing is also really important. You got to do both.
Awesome. So sort of before I let you go, because I know your time is valuable and I've appreciated all the time you've given us so far, what are kind of the do's and don'ts? Like if you were sitting there talking with somebody at the base strategy, like you obviously laid out what you want to do in the beginning. So what shouldn't they be doing? What should you avoid as a new content creator trying to, kind of build all this stuff?
Well, I mean, I think that number one, don't try to fake it. I think that's the worst thing. Build something that's authentic to who you are and what you're all about. I think a lot of people try to fake stuff and try to, hey, hi, don't be someone you're not, right? So I think that being authentic, being yourself, being personable, and being personal are things that you. So a lot of people do. They try to fake it. Don't try to fake it. You don't want to try to fake it. Don't expect results right away. You're playing a long game. So I think that's important. Don't worry if you can't come up with content. Don't worry if you, have a content that doesn't go well. I mean, gosh, I have stinkers out there, and that it happens, and that's okay. So don't feel bad about that. And, the other thing is don't stop. Don't stop creating. Don't stop asking questions. Don't stop learning. Don't stop, putting yourself out there to learn as much as you can, because it doesn't matter what age you are, whether you're 18 or 38 or 58, you can be a thought leader and build a brand that people remember.
So Bobby, I'd say you're pretty good at your job, because I'm feeling motivated just off this podcast to do even more than what we do already. So Bobby, I really want to thank you for coming on and giving us some of your time. I really appreciate it.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks so much, Alex and David.
It,
No,
you know,
thank
it was
you.
great. David, do you have anything else before we let Bobby go?
Nah, I enjoyed this podcast a lot. I learned a lot. I really enjoy. I mean, I think it's really good to really hear about. Basically, it's a lot of it's pursuit and just understanding that the pursuit might take a while. Even just pursuing what you actually want in yourself and what you want to do, branding wise, like for yourself and whatever you want to do, and then pursuing that goal outside as well. It's awesome to see. Like, you just got to build. You just got to build, man. Bring your foundation, build and build and build, and you will usually get to somewhere. It might not be exactly where your goal was, but you'll get somewhere.
Absolutely. And make sure you ask for help. Like there's a lot of people that they help you.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get to this place without the help from lots of people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, one thing I take away from Bobby is undaunting, relentless positivity. Even when things are down. Like I said, you could have certainly had the villain origin story because you went through some hard times, but you didn't. You turned it around, and now you're looking, and hopefully you don't use your influence now to become a villain. Hopefully that isn't the long game where you're
I'm so glad I used my power for good. That's great.
Yeah, no. So you definitely could have, but you went the good route, and we're really fortunate that you're willing to come on and do these types of shows. It's
awesome.
Really, really gracious of you to do that. And again, I just want to let everyone know he's Bobby Umar. I'm not going to go down the laundry list again. Listen to the beginning. We don't have another hour to do the podcast, but he is a true thought leader. He's a motivational speaker. Now, Bobby, if anyone wants to book you to do a speaking engagement, how do they contact you?
Best thing is to go to rayallen.com, which is my website, and then you can get access to my my speaker agent and book me for speaking gigs.
Perfect. And is there anything that you would like to promote? You talked about your book. You talked about anything. What would you like to promote before we let you go?
Yeah, I'm doing a bunch of stuff, but the one that's coming up right now, December 3rd, I'm doing a free training on how to expand your thought leadership brand and your digital influence and platform beyond one platform. Most of us are on only LinkedIn or only Twitter or only Instagram. Mm-hmm. I'm like, and now that my friend, my LinkedIn got locked out, my friend Facebook got locked out, Twitter is in total chaos.
Yeah, Twitter.
We have to be clear where we should be able to expand across multiple platforms. You look at the best thought leaders out there, Bernie Brown, Simon Sinek, Gary Vaynerchuk, they're across many platforms. So I'm doing this free workshop on how to actually build across multiple platforms. In particular, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok is what the 4 we're working on.
Okay. So go look out for that workshop, sign up for that workshop. If anybody misses your workshop and wants to still access it, is there any way to get it, or is it lost to the ether when it's done?
There are ways to get it. Just DM me and you can see how to get access to the replay.
And he's not lying. Bobby's a very gracious guy. All it took to get him to jump on this show was a quick DM. We took a little time to talk. And like I said, he's an awesome dude, a gracious dude. He came on the show, and we are really fortunate to have him. So again, Alex Cuesta's show. We appreciate everyone for listening. Yes, go find David Cuesta Cola on Twitch. Go watch him play some video games. He's okay at them. I'm not going to say he's good.
I'm okay.
He's all right. When he plays fighting games, he's really good. Everything
I'll get better.
He's okay. But again, everyone, thank you so much for listening. Go find us on the socials. Have a good one, everybody.